The Overcoat by Ruskin Bond. It was a clear, frosty weather, and the moon came up over the Himalayan peaks. I could see the patches of the snow still lay on the roads of the hill station. I would have been quite happy in bed with a book and hot water bottle by my side. But I had promised the Kapadas that I had to go their party, and I felt it would be cherished of me to stay away. I put on 2 sweaters, an old football scarf, and an overcoat, and set off down the moonlight road. It was a walk of just over a mile to the Kapadas' house, and I had to cover about a half distance when I saw a girl standing in the middle of the road. She must have been 16 or 17. Long hair hanging to her waist and dressed pink and lavender that reminded me of the photos in my grandmother's family album. When I went closer, I noticed that she had a lovely eyes and a winning smile. "Good evening," I said. "It's cold night to be out. Are you going to the party?" she asked. "That's right, and I can see your lovely dress that you are going to. Come along, we are nearly there." She fell into the step beside me, and we soon saw light from the Kapadas' house shining brightly through the deodars. The girl told me that her name was Julie, and I had not seen her before. But then I had only been in the hill station a few months. There was quite a crowd at the party, and no one seemed to know Julie. Everyone thought she was a friend of mine, and I did not deny it. Obviously, she was someone who was feeling lonely and wanted to be friendly with people. And she was certainly enjoying herself. I did not see her do much eating or drinking, but she flitted about from one group to another, talking, listening, laughing, and when the music began, she was dancing almost continuously, alone or with partners. It did not matter which. She was completely wrapped up in the music. It was almost midnight when I got up to go. I had drunk a fair amount of punch, and I was ready for bed. As I was saying goodnight to my host and wishing everyone a Merry Christmas, Julie slipped her arms into mine, and she had to be going home too. When we were outside, I said, "Where do you live, Julie?" "At Woolsburn," she said, "at top of the hill." "There's a cold wind," I said, "and although your dress is beautiful, it does not look very warm. Here, you better wear my overcoat. I have plenty of protection." She did not protest and allowed me to slip my overcoat her shoulders. Then we started out for a walk home, but I did not have to escort her all the way. At about spot where we had met, she said, "There is a shortcut from here. I will just scramble up the hillside." "Do you know it well?" I asked. "It's a very narrow path." "Oh, I know everyone on the path. I use it all the time, and besides, it's really a bright night." "Well, keep the coat on," I said. "I can collect it tomorrow." She hesitated for a moment, then smiled and nodded to me. She then disappeared up the hill, and I went home alone. The next day, I walked up to the Woolsburn. I crossed a little brook from which the house had probably got its name and entered an open iron gate. But of the house itself remained just a roofless ruin, a pile of stones, a shattered chimney, a few Doric pillars where a veranda had once stood. Had Julie played a joke on me? Or I had found a wrong house? I walked around the hill to the mission house where the Tylers lived and asked old Mrs. Tyler if she knew a girl called Julie. No, I don't think so, she said. Where does she live? At Woolsburn? I was told. But the house is just ruined. Nobody has lived at Woolsburn for over 40 years. The McCannions live there, one of the old families who settled here. But when their girl died, she stopped and gave me a cute look. I think her name was Julie. Anyway, when she died, they sold the house and went away. No one ever lived it again, and it fell into decay. But it could not be the same Julie you're looking for. She's died of consumption. There was much you could not do about in those days. Her grave is in the cemetery, just down the road. I thanked Mrs. Tyler and walked slowly down the road to the cemetery, not really wanting to know anymore, but propelled forward almost against my will. It was a small cemetery under the deodars. You could see the eternal snows of the Himalayas standing out against the Prussian blue sky. Here lay the bones of forgotten emperors, builders, soldiers, merchants, adventurers, their wives and children. It did not take me long to find Julie's grave. It had simple headstone with her name clearly outlined on it. Julie McCannion, 1923 to 1939. With this one movement, taken the next, gone to her maker, gone to her rest. Although many monsoons had swept across the cemetery, wearing down the stones, they had not touched this little tombstone. I was turning to leave when I caught a glimpse of something familiar. Behind the headstone, I walked round to where it lay, neatly folded. On the grass was my overcoat.